Hello everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So, here we are, April 2019, and now we are already officially into the silly season of the 2020 electoral race. Obviously, we are going to talk about old Sheriff Joe. Creepy Uncle Joe, which I'm sure everybody knows by this point, unless you've been living under a rock, what the past week has brought for old Joe Biden. And to start off with, this is silly. It is, and I understand it, I get it. I have been on record saying that the 2020 election season is going to be one of the dumbest, most vicious, just most batshit insane electoral seasons we have ever seen, and this is kind of the opening salvo of that. Now, over the past week, it has become a big deal about Joe Biden's past of being rather handsy with women, and to be fair, and to point out, he has not even declared that he is running yet, so we're not even there yet. Like, we're just He's thinking about running. And this was something that when the rumor mill first kind of started winding up about Joe Biden maybe running for the Democratic nomination for president, there were people talking about this and kind of wondering how Biden would square the circle of this being the current environment that we're in right now and how exactly he would address his creepy Uncle Joe past, because this is something that has been a meme as far back as I can remember. Like, the whole Joe Biden is a creeper thing has been known for years and years and years and years, and people have been making this joke on the internet for years, and we've had the memes and the videos and all of that, so this is not new information by any stretch of the imagination, which is why this is kind of silly and dumb. But here we are. So now we get to have this discussion about creepy Uncle Joe. And the story for me on this has not been so much that it has become an issue, because like I said, there were people that kind of expected this to be an issue if he ever did decide that he wanted to run for president. What has been interesting about this particular story has been the reactions to it from certain segments of the population and certain other segments of the population. We're going to go ahead and start with this. Kind of all started kicking off last weekish. Like, it was this, where this all started as far as this particular kerfuffle is that period of time where it was like all three of these essays kind of dropped at the same time. The Buttigieg essay about him not being gay enough, that one essay about the black guy who broke up with his white girlfriend because reasons, that was just another stupid fucking essay. And then this was the third one, that a woman named Lucy Flores, she had written it for The Cut, and she was talking about this particular encounter that she had with Joe Biden back when she was running for office in Arizona, I do believe it was. I think she was running to be vice governor. And so anyway, it was a story that's kind of familiar if you know anything about Joe Biden, but he was there to stump for her, and so they had just met. Like, they weren't friends or anything before this. They met at this event, and Joe Biden had come up behind her and, like, put his hands on her shoulders and, like, sniffed her hair and kissed the back of her head, which sounds stupid when you hear it like that, but I can imagine being rather creeped out by some dude that you don't even know. Like, why are you touching me like this? Like, I don't know you like that. So that's what kicked off this whole current news cycle of creepy Joe Biden. And so, like I said, the responses to it have been rather interesting. The first one that I saw was Alyssa Milano. Of all people, Alyssa fucking Milano decides to go write this whole tweet thread defending Joe Biden. Alyssa Milano, the self-styled queen of the Me Too movement, decided that this was a good hill to die on, and that we should defend Joe Biden and his decades-long history of being a fucking creeper, because she's friends with Joe Biden, and she likes Joe, and I'm sure it was all just harmless, and he didn't mean anything by it, and blah, 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 and we should all just move on. And I'm like, no. Stop. Wait a goddamn second. No, I'm not accepting this from Alyssa Milano, because she has championed, and the Me Too movement has championed, men being canceled for a hell of a lot less than what Joe Biden has done. And so this whole idea that, oh, it's fine, it's just Joe being Joe, and he's just whatever, it's no big deal, it's no big whoop. And I'm like, that's funny. I'm sure there's a lot of men who lost their jobs and lost their careers and their professional standing off of a hell of a lot less than this. Like, guys have lost their jobs over making off-color jokes or saying something that somebody else interpreted as offensive. Like, not even putting hands on somebody, especially in not doing the creepy Joe Biden stuff that Joe Biden does. And they have gotten just killed for it. But you want to defend Joe Biden right now. Okay. The second group of people that I thought was really interesting watching defend Joe Biden was the women on The View. Yeah, more Me Too movement people who went even further than Alyssa Milano did and basically accused Lucy Flores of coming forward with this now because she's a Bernie supporter, and basically questioning her motives as to why she wants to tell this story now versus any other point in history. Wait a minute, I'm sorry. I thought we were supposed to believe all women, and we weren't supposed to ask those kinds of questions about motivation or why somebody would be telling their story at this particular time versus some other particular time in the past or in the future. It's almost as if there's a double standard here. Imagine that! There's a double standard in Me Too, depending on how useful as a man you are to the movement and to the current political situation. Which, here's how I view this. They all took a step back, looked at the numbers being what they are right now, and yes, I know, poll numbers mean absolutely nothing right now, I know that. But looking at the current situation and looking at current polling, you've got Bernie, and then you've got Joe Biden, and then like everybody else just falls off a cliff numbers-wise. So you're looking at Joe Biden like, okay, this is somebody who has a legitimate chance at taking a shot at Trump in 2020. So we must protect him at all costs. Like I tell you guys, all outrage is situational. It's all dependent upon who the person is that is being accused of whatever it is they're being accused of. And if you're somebody who's disposable, then you will be disposed of. If you're not disposable, if you're Joe Biden, if you're somebody who may be running to be the Democratic nominee for president, and you might have an actual shot at Trump, all of a sudden, everything you've ever done is fucking forgiven. And to be sure, this is hardly the worst thing that Joe Biden has ever done. Even if you just go off of his political record, it sucks. It's shit. He's supported so many bad ideas as far as just the Iraq war, death penalties, the drug war, just everything bad that you could possibly think that one politician would back. Joe Biden backed it and then some. So there's plenty of reasons to not like Joe Biden outside of this, but it's fascinating watching the mask slip a bit as far as the Me Too movement is concerned, and watching that there is a double standard. And yeah, if you are a man who is deemed to still have some value and some utility in society, and that you might still be able to accomplish something that the Me Too movement, broader speaking would approve of, you're protected. All of a sudden, people will come out of the woodwork to defend you. When, if Joe Biden was somebody other than Joe Biden, if Joe Biden was some, I don't know, schmo Republican or just some lower rank guy, he would have been thrown to the wolves already. Like, his career would be done. So, that's why, like, I've often called bullshit on the Me Too movement, but this is just another example of how it's fucking bullshit. Like, you really don't care. And the point of the View actually questioning this woman's motives, and to be sure, maybe they are political. I don't know. They probably are. I mean, we are in the 2020 election season, and I don't discount the fact that she's telling her story now for a reason, but all of a sudden it's okay to ask those questions? Because it sure as shit wasn't before. You couldn't ask why any woman was bringing accusations against a man at whatever point that she was doing it. That was verboten. You couldn't do that. If you did that, all of a sudden you were victim shaming or you were questioning a survivor's story. And now it's okay? That's on the table. All right, I will remember that. Duly noted. But going back to the kind of the more nuts and bolts parts of the controversy, and this is one defense that I've seen people say, and I don't think that they're entirely understanding what they're saying when they say it. And that is making this excuse for what he's done by saying, well, it wasn't sexual. Like, okay, yes, it wasn't sexual. He wasn't, like, grabbing him by the pussy or anything, or he wasn't, like, touching women's boobs or their butts. But actually, on that note, there have been some pictures of Joe Biden where that hand is creeping into side boob territory, okay? Every man knows that there's certain places you can put your hands on a woman that are okay versus not okay, and he creeps into not okay quite often. So, but the broader point here is that, no, putting your hands on a woman's shoulders, or kissing the back of their heads, or bringing their face into yours to rub noses or touch foreheads, or whatever other creepy ass things that Joe Biden has done, it's not sexual. It's intimate. And in a way, that's kind of worse, because you're entering somebody else's personal space in a way that presumes that you have the kind of relationship with that person to enter that kind of personal space. Like, every guy knows, like, you don't just walk up to random women and put your hands on their shoulders, or hug them from behind, or sniff their hair, or kiss the back of their heads, or basically touch them any place where you would be touching a woman that would imply that you have an intimate relationship with that woman. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's something that you don't do unless you have that relationship. Most guys can figure this out. Apparently Joe Biden cannot. And so, yeah, he's got some boundary issues. Like, some serious boundary issues. And, again, just watching people try to defend this, like, oh, he's just handsy, he's a tactile politician, he just likes to touch people, and it's like, no, it's never been okay. Like, most people don't like being touched like that by people that they don't know. And so, yeah, it was just weird to watch people defend this, especially knowing that if it were somebody else, they would not be defending this kind of behavior at all, and in fact, have thrown men under the bus for much, much, much less egregious offenses than the things that Joe Biden has done. So, Joe Biden, in response to all this, releases a video. And it's a weird video where he doesn't actually apologize for anything. He just kind of says he'll try to do better in the future. So, not an apology, but I don't know where this video... It's a weird video. Like, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you can go on Twitter or on Instagram or I'm sure it's up on YouTube now, and you can watch the video, and it's just kind of like, I still don't think he understands what's going on here. Which is interesting that he doesn't understand what's going on here, because another thing that you can really slam Joe Biden for or defend him, depending on your personal stance on this, is Joe Biden was a huge backer of the hashtag #MeToo, hashtag #BelieveAllWomen, but also of the infamous Dear Colleague letter, which was issued under the Obama administration, and that letter is what started the Title IX situation as we know it today. So Joe Biden has been a pretty big supporter of the current environment that he now finds himself in. And that's ironic as fuck. Because a lot of these guys, I think, that back this sort of thing, think that the day will never come for them. Like, that this will never bite you in the ass. Well, sorry, Joe. Here we are. And now you're getting thrown under the bus that you once drove. I mean, he was very much a big supporter of this. So, congratulations for making this toxic environment to where these kinds of things even need to be discussed. And now you're a victim of it. There's a little bit of poetic justice in that. And it's funny. It's funny to think about. But before we leave off of this, because of course, Joe Biden being Joe Biden, and if you were not following Joe Biden over the 8 years that he was vice president, and even before that, usually when Joe Biden opens his mouth, something stupid comes out. Like the man is a walking gaffe machine. And so he's doing this speech somewhere, and he decides he's going to try to make a joke. He's going to try to make a joke about having consent to touch somebody. Unfortunately for Joe, he decides to make this joke about having consent to touch an underage boy. Yeah, I think most of us could figure out to not make that joke, but he's got these kids up on stage, and he goes and he puts his arms around this one boy, and he makes a joke like, I got consent to touch him. And we're all just like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, did you really just do this? And the thing is, like, that joke could have been funny if it was done with an adult. Like, even if it was an adult woman, and he, like, hugged her, and he made a joke like, she gave me consent to touch her. Okay, that would be funny. Like, okay, that could be a funny joke. That was an underage child that you just said gave you consent to touch him. No, sir. That's not how this works. Like, oh my God. Could you make a situation any worse? So, that's where we're at with poor Joe. And, well, actually not poor Joe. Joe kind of deserves this, to be completely honest. But the question is now, will this keep him out of the race? And to my mind, I think the answer is no. I think this is happening early enough, and that it's something that, like I said, it's not news. It's not something new that we're just now finding out. We've all known about Joe Biden being creepy Uncle Joe for at least a decade now. So I don't think, especially with the poll numbers being as they are right now, I don't think this keeps him from entering the race if he wants to. I mean, I think he'll be fine. There's plenty of people willing to defend him, obviously, and to stand up for him and go ride for him. So we'll see, because it's kind of still up in the air right now. And even Biden has said that if he announces that he's going to run, he wants to do it kind of later. Like, he wants to let pretty much everybody else announce first, and then he'll announce, so he can be like the last person, I guess, so he can get all of the accolades and all that shit. Whatever. I mean, announce whenever the hell you're going to announce. Probably should do it sooner rather than later at this point. But anyway, moving on from creepy Uncle Joe. The other story I wanted to talk about, and this is one that's kind of been flaring up and dying down and flaring up and dying down. And it kind of flared up again this past week because Kristen Gillibrand tweeted about it. And that is this idea of abolishing the Electoral College. Now, like I said, this has been something that's been kind of on and off ever since Trump won in 2016. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first time I can remember seeing somebody who is actively running for the Democratic nomination for president who has point blank said that the Electoral College should be abolished. Now, I don't think that people who advocate for that have really sat down and thought about what that would look like. Not that they sit down and think at all, but anyway. Because there is a reason the Electoral College exists, and I mean, we can get into an in-depth conversation about that, but here's the thing. And this is what I contrast this against, is the idea that obviously if you get rid of the Electoral College, you have direct democracy, which means you have one person, one vote, which sounds great in theory. But in practice, we have an example right now that we can look at that is an utter and complete dumpster fire shitstorm, and that is Brexit. And I hadn't really realized before. I was looking up something else, and I mean, the vote itself was incredibly, incredibly close. It wasn't exactly 51-49, but I mean, it was pretty much 51-49. But I looked at a map of the UK, and I hadn't realized before I looked at that map, because it broke it down from the regions that decided that they wanted to stay versus the regions that decided that they wanted to leave. And it is so stark when you look at the map that, like, everybody in the north voted to stay, and pretty much everyone in the south voted to leave. And it's like, it's almost a perfect split across the country. It's wild when you look at the map. But again, that's what happens when you have one person, one vote. And this is what happens when you have 51-49, is you end up eventually with this kind of shitstorm that the UK is currently dealing with right now. And for what it's worth, nobody quite seems to know what the hell is going to happen in the UK. They're supposed to leave. Like, the whole point of the vote was, technically, it was a referendum. It's not a legally binding vote. But the UK government had said before the vote that whatever it was, whether it was stay, leave, they would abide by the vote. And so, ever since it came out that they voted to leave the EU, it's just been 2 years of absolute just insanity over there. Like, if any of you are listening to this in England, I am so sorry for you guys, because maybe if there was something more like the Electoral College, like, even if you sat down and broke it down by the numbers, it would still be a referendum on leaving the EU, but it would be a much stronger case, because it would have been, if like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but if you broke it down like the same way we break down the Electoral College in the US, it would have been a landslide vote to leave. So this wouldn't be as much of an issue. I mean, it would still be one. But you basically just had one half of the country decide for, well, I shouldn't say the country, because the UK is inclusive of a couple of countries, but you had one half of the people decide for the whole entirety of all the people. Like, you can understand where this would be a problem in the US, right? And so, ever since the 2016 Brexit vote, there's been controversy on top of controversy. There's been people who have said that they need to redo the vote, which, to my mind, I don't even understand how you make that argument. Like, what, you get to call a mulligan on a vote because it didn't go the way you wanted it to go? And I can remember, actually, right after the vote, there were stories floating around that the people who voted to leave didn't understand what they were voting for exactly. Like, there was a lot leading up to that Brexit vote of just kind of really ugly campaigning, and there was a lot of racial issues kind of thrown out there, a lot of immigration issues, and a lot, I think, of people who voted to leave the EU did it on the basis of immigration and didn't really think about, like, okay, what impact is this going to have, like, economically on us? What impact is this going to have as far as being able to travel within Europe? What impact is this going to have on our day-to-day lives outside of, well, now we won't have to let all the immigrants in because the EU says that we have to let the immigrants in? So a lot of people didn't really think about the vote, I don't think, but still, I mean, that's not a reason to redo the vote. Anyway, bringing it back to the US, there is a reason, like I said, that the Electoral College exists, and that is to avoid these sorts of situations. Because could you imagine if in the US, and here's another scenario that I could see happening if you got rid of the Electoral College. What that's going to do is really open up the door for third parties to run. And once you get rid of that 270 Electoral College vote requirement, now you start getting to a point where you can win the presidency of the United States, let's say, because that's pretty much the one of the main, like, countrywide votes that we do. You could win the president of the United States with a plurality of the vote. And if you start looking at this as a situation where you're not going to have two people running, or even like Democrat, Republican, and then third parties, if it's just straight up, like, no Electoral College votes, like nothing of that, just whoever wins, wins. You can end up with, say, I don't know, 6, 7 people on a ballot, and then the person who wins may not even get 50% of the vote. They may end up getting 40% of the vote, 30% of the vote. But as long as they got the most votes, they would be the winner. You see the kind of absolute fucking bedlam that would cause in this country, right? Like, and for what it's worth, that's not entirely outside the realm of possibility, because I meant to look it up before I started recording and I forgot, but I don't remember the last election where the person who won actually got 50% or over of the vote. So we've been running this way for a while, where somebody who didn't even get 50% of the vote has been president of the United States. Now, like I said, imagine if this is somebody with 40%, 30%. I mean, that's not going to work in this country. Like, that's just not going to fly. Like, that, oh my god, that would be so fucking ugly. But I don't think that people who advocate for abolishing the Electoral College has really sat down and thought about it in that way. And I don't think they've ever really looked at how European politics works, because that is a situation that you do have a lot in Europe, where you do end up having like 4, 5, 6 different party candidates running to be prime minister or whatever elected national office that they're running for. And so you end up with these situations. And it's like, I don't think that the US would be at all capable of rationally handling that situation, especially given how large this country is and how many people there are in it. Like, that's just not going to work. Like, that kind of direct democracy is just not going to fly. Like, the founding fathers put in the Electoral College for a reason, and that is so that certain segments of the country don't make decisions for the whole of the country. It's a way of ensuring that the lower population states do still have an adequate amount of representation in relationship to the more densely populated states. They weren't stupid. They understood what the fuck they were doing when they did that. And I don't think people that call for the abolition of the Electoral College understand what the purpose was. Or they are still operating under the assumption that the duopoly would still exist, and that there wouldn't be these sorts of more doomsday-y kind of scenarios. And I also don't think that they realize that really voter attendance, especially over the past couple of elections, has just been in the toilet. And like I said, I cannot remember the last presidential winner who got at least 50% of the popular vote. So, I mean, that's a bad idea. It's a very bad idea, and I really wish people would stop saying it. So, anyway, those are the two things that I really wanted to discuss in this weekly roundup. Kind of a weird news week. I mean, there was a couple of other things going on. I guess I should mention it real quick before I bounce out of this, but the House and the Senate actually did vote to tell Donald Trump that we need to pull out of Yemen. And of course, Trump vetoed the bill that once it made it to his desk for pulling out of Yemen. So I guess we're not pulling out of Yemen anytime soon. which makes no sense because he made such a big deal about pulling out of Syria. It's like Yemen is even more of a no-brainer than Syria. So I don't get it. And plus, I don't really know where we're at with the Syrian thing anymore. Like, it's just, everything in the White House is just such a fucking mess and such a disaster, and it just changes on a day-to-day basis. And that's not super good either, but at least, I mean, there is kind of the chaos theory of if nothing gets done, it's good, but I don't know, there's some things that do need to get done, and the fact that they're not getting done is really not helping people. Like, we really do need to figure out what we're doing in Syria and Yemen. We really do need to figure out this immigration situation. We really do need to figure out this fiscal situation. So there are things that need to be done, and the fact that they're not getting done isn't really a net positive. It's really more of a net negative. So anyway, I just wanted to go ahead and touch on that before I left. So at this point, I will go ahead and wrap it up. If you did make it this far, as always, thank you. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.